Hi, and welcome to a new episode of the Luxembourg PE&VC Stories. Today's guest will be Francesco Ricciuti. He's associate at Runa Capital. Welcome, Francesco.
Thank you very much.
A real pleasure. So, what can you tell us about Runa Capital? Who, when, and how did that whole adventure start?
Yes, so Runa Capital is an adventure that started from three friends that were former tech entrepreneurs. It all started in 2010, and one of these three friends is actually our managing director that sits in Luxembourg these days. First headquarters was in Silicon Valley, of course, back in 2010. That was where you had to be for VC investments. But we've always invested in Europe, given our origins that are Europeans. And with time, we noticed that we were investing more and more in Europe. And so we decided it was worth moving the headquarters back to Europe. And that's what we did. And we are now headquartered here in Luxembourg.
Good choice.
Thank you.
Could you, let's say, share more details about your verticals and also kind of investments you like?
Yes, absolutely. As I was mentioning, our founders are tech entrepreneurs. And they started in a time when the deep tech topics were cloud transformation and mobile. So everything was moving from mainframe to the cloud, and the loads were moving from laptops to smartphones, right? And so those were the first investment we started to make, and everything that was connected to that. So how the enterprise software was changing, but also how finance was changing, so fintech infrastructure. These two big topics are the same today, so we still believe there's a lot of change that can happen in finance and also in enterprise software. It is always changing. Of course, today's AI is not anymore the cloud, but there's still a lot of disruption that can happen. But also AI brought a lot of important problems in computing. So we're also looking at that space now these days. And that's more the common deep tech conception these days. So we're investing in quantum technologies, in photonics, but also on semiconductors, chips, and so on.
Yeah, it's fantastic that you were able to also witness all this evolution.
Yes, absolutely.
If we now look at, let's say, have a closer look at Runa Capital setup, the organization, etc. You mentioned the HQ in Luxembourg. Yes. What can you tell us more about that?
So we, as many of our portfolio companies have gone fully remote or distributed, we are also a pretty distributed team. So our headquarters are here in Luxembourg, which is a very central location for Benelux, for Germany, for France. But we have also a hub in London, which is of course very important for the UK ecosystem, but also for the Nordics. We have one partner that sits in Berlin that focuses mostly on that ecosystem, and we still have someone in the US because we still invest in the US. So we have a couple of people sitting in San Francisco as well.
That's a nice exposure.
Yes.
Now let's say about the last years within your firm.
Yes.
What could you tell us? What happened?
Yes, of course, these last years were pretty interesting years, I would say. Everybody knows about the macro changes that happened after years of zero interest rates and crazy stuff, right? But we've actually run the numbers, and we've noticed that most of the best companies that are very big today were born during years of crisis. So 2008, even year 2000 with the dot-com bubble, right? So after a couple of years of companies that were going bust and down rounds, we're actually starting to see very resilient and good entrepreneurs starting their own business. And we are very excited because we believe that this is the cohort of businesses that will become big in the next 10 years. So it's a good time to invest.
And what's your take on ESG and impact? How important is that?
Well, we believe that these days it's impossible to do business without keeping an eye on how the business we do has an impact on the climate and on ESG in general. We're not openly climate investors, but as a matter of fact, a bunch of things that we do has a positive impact. I mentioned quantum technologies and photonics and computing. Now we know how big the impact of data centers and compute is on the climate. And if we were to deploy photonic chips, for example, in all data centers, we would reduce immensely the impact of computing. So many of the things we do have a very direct impact on the climate and ESG topics, actually.
Okay, sounds like a strong opportunity for the future.
Yes, it is. And also, I mean, this also brings a lot of business opportunities, because less energy is, of course, very good for the climate, but it's also very good for the pockets, of course. Energy is expensive. So these are clear examples of ESG going hands in hands with good business, and not like sort of in two separate directions, I would say.
This is a very smart approach.
Yeah.
If we now let's focus on the Luxembourg ecosystem,
yes.
What would be your perception about our hub?
So, as I mentioned before, Luxembourg has this very good opportunity that is given by its position, right? It's close to everything, and it's close to the biggest hubs in Europe for startups and venture capital and innovation. You are 1 hour away from Berlin, but also from Paris, from London, from Brussels, which is very good. Also, we see that it's a very international ecosystem where people find their own pockets. There's many languages being spoken. There's many nationalities, given the presence of big companies and governmental institutions. And finally, we believe that we've seen that in the last years, the government of Luxembourg and the institutions have done very good things in innovation. I mean, one example is the supercomputer that was recently implemented in the university here. Those are all things that nurture the innovation and the ecosystem, and are very useful for people that want to build startups. So I think if I had to suggest something, I would double down on these strengths that you guys have here, because they could be really important.
And they are also for the diversification of our
Absolutely.
future economy.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. If we now, let's say, move to the more personal part of our interview, Francesco, what did you study and where did you start your career?
Yes, so I have a pretty uncommon story before venture capital, because I actually started studying classical. I did classical studies in Italy. So I studied Latin and Greek and all those stuff. And then I went into engineering. So I'm a robotics engineer, which is already like a big leap. Then I worked in robotics for the first part of my career, mostly in startups. And after a while, I tried to start my own company, which didn't work out, but it was a very good learning experience. And through that company, I got exposure to the venture capital. And I thought it could be a fun job. And that's how I got in touch with Runa, and then how I started this job. So various things that got me into this position, actually.
Yeah, but very interesting journey.
Thank you.
Any advice you would like to share with our audience in order to enter the VC field or any other?
Absolutely. So I think one thing I see now that I'm a VC, so I'm sitting on the other side of the table from the entrepreneurs, is that having tried and failed and having seen how hard it is to do things, I feel empathy and I know what they're passing through, what they're going through. So I think one important advice I have for people that want to get into this industry is try to have your hands dirty with entrepreneurship, or try to do something yourself before doing this job, because you'll end up giving advice, you'll end up talking to entrepreneurs and judging their ventures. If you have not tried, if you don't know how hard it is to succeed, you'll be in the difficult position of pretending to know what they're doing but not actually knowing. So my suggestion is try to get your hands dirty with something before getting into this industry.
Yes, this is also a nice learning curve. Also that you were hands-on, skin in the game. You tried, but you learned your lessons and you reused them afterwards.
Everything seems so easy from the outside, right? You look at things and you're like, how the hell are they not succeeding? But then when you try, everything is on fire and you don't know where to look. So better to try before judging, I would say.
Okay, good lesson. Any specific person or leader who inspired you during your personal or professional life? Yeah,
so I think, there are many, but sticking to the venture capital world and the job I'm doing now, one person I really admire is Paul Graham. And his essays have inspired a generation of VCs. So that's definitely a must read for who wants to invest, but also who wants to do who wants to be an entrepreneur. I think they're very relevant. And even though they've been, most of them have been written a long time ago, they're super relevant these days.
Okay, so kind of historical and with lots of value then.
Yeah,
and since you, let's say, talked about now his essays, yes. Any specific podcast or book you would like to share also with the audience?
Yes, so of course I could talk about all these fancy economics book, but a book I reread after a long time in the past months, and I really enjoyed rereading, is the De Brevitate Vitae from Seneca, from the Latin Roman author. And it's a small book, so you can read it in like less than a week. And it's amazing because it's super actual. It was written during Roman Empire, and it's super actual. It looks like it was written in 2020 probably. And it talks about how hard it is to enjoy what we have. And these days with social networks and attention spans being very small and all these shiny things around us, it's really hard to enjoy what we have and to have time for ourselves. And that's what he says, right? So I really suggest reading that.
This proves once again that ancient and classical culture is even now in modern times very helpful.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, well done, and thanks a lot for all those insights, Francesco.
Thank you for having me.
It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.